Life Stories.
Well, hello, everybody. Wherever you are, whatever nation you're in, it's a pleasure to be bringing my life story. First time I've ever done this online, so it's new for me as well. I'm a bit nervous, I must admit. But I just feel that there are people within the sound of my voice tonight, and you've lost all hope in your situation. You feel like your back's up against the wall. You feel like you're in a corner and there's no way out. But I'm going to bring you a message of hope in your hopelessness and despair. Jesus wants to bring you hope in your hopelessness. He is the answer for your situation. You know, when I was a teenager, I remember I've got a very vivid memory of going to a rifle club. I was crazy about shooting. I would shoot anything that moved. But I used to go target shooting, 2-2 small bore rifle shooting. And I was walking down through town and I passed a mission hall. And there was a chap on the door and he said to me as I went past, would you like to come in? Get a cup of tea and all the rest of it, hear the gospel and so on. And I was so relieved to be able to say to him, no, I'm going to my rifle club. And he said to me, and I'll never forget it, as long as you know where you're going. And that sentence stuck with me to this very day, that one sentence. And I want to ask you tonight, do you know where you're going? Do you know when you're going to spend eternity? I know that when I draw my last breath on earth, I'll draw my next in the presence of God. What about you? If you were to die tonight, where would you go and spend eternity? My story is very much about life and death, death and life. And so that is a sort of common theme that runs right through. And at the end, I'm going to give you an opportunity how you can know the saving power of Jesus Christ in your life that I have experienced. You can experience exactly what I have. You can experience the transforming power of Jesus Christ in your life. And I'm going to pray with you at the end, and you can join in that prayer. You know, Jesus went into the synagogue in Nazareth, the Jewish church, and he read from the Old Testament, Isaiah 61, chapter 61. And he said, the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is upon me, for the Lord has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to set the captives at liberty, to open prison doors to those who are bound. And you know, although I was a policeman in Edinburgh City and I locked people up, locked lots of people up for different crimes, and yet I was a prisoner. I was in a prison cell myself. And maybe that's your situation tonight. Maybe that you're in a prison cell. Maybe you're in a prison house. Maybe you're a prisoner and a captive to different things. You know, I was very successful. I had qualifications, I had friends, I had money, I had absolutely everything that anybody could need. I had job prospects for the future. I was told that I'd probably make sergeant or inspector. But you know, there was something very much inside of me. I was dead inside. I was really dead inside. But Jesus Christ made me alive. He brought me to life. I had been physically and verbally abused for years, not sexually, but verbally and physically abused for years. And it had broken me inside. Something inside me had broken. But I had, because of that, I had the most incredible anger and an explosive anger. And I vowed that if anybody so much as touched me, it would be the last thing they did. And so I was always fighting. And but I was also drinking from the age of 12. And I'm talking about every kind of spirits, tumbler loads of it. I was out of my mind on a whole cocktail of alcohol at the age of 12. And I loved the effect of it, but I loved it because it deadened. It was almost like self medication. It sort of killed the feelings inside that I felt, and so I drank heavily for years, and so I had this problem with fighting. And when I was 16, I found myself in the sheriff court in Edinburgh on an assault charge because, yes, the person had attacked me, but I tried to kill them. And if I hadn't been dragged off the person, I would have killed them. It was murder that was in my heart. And the person got taken away to hospital unconscious, and I ended up on an assault charge. And it was by the grace of God that I still managed to get into the police, because it was in the police force that Jesus was going to really get through to me. And he wanted me in the police force to go through various experiences. And I was bound over to keep the peace. And I was told, if you get in another fight, if you get into bother, you'll be done for that and for this. So keep your nose clean. Well, it didn't stop me fighting. And I was still in fights. And a very funny story. Well, it's quite funny, really. One of my school friends that I still see to this day, I've known him since I was 5 years old, my friend Jim. He tells the story of the great hit and run. I didn't actually hit somebody and run, but he calls it the hit and run. And I had asked this girl out in my hometown, and for some odd reason, a guy who turned out to be the junior Scottish boxing champion challenged me to a fight. It might have been his girlfriend, I don't know. But he took the hump, and so I was challenged to come to a certain place called the Square and have it out with him. And I just thought, well, he's just going to wipe the floor with me. So I came up in my friend's car. I must have been about 17 years old. And all this guy and all his friends were around him, ready for the fight. And I just jumped out the car, crossed the road, and I thought to myself, well, that my
Life Stories.
Hey, Alan, thank you very much. Hi, guys, and thanks for inviting me tonight. And yeah, so just to share about my story, my life story, and to talk a little bit about what I'm involved in at the moment. So just to take you back, I didn't grow up in a Christian home. I knew nothing of religion, Christianity, or God. In fact, my family, my mum was into witchcraft. So actually, if there's any kind of, if there was any religion or anything in my house, it was actually a practicing witch, which was my mum. And my home life was a bit dysfunctional. I was one of 7 kids, and we all had different dads. And I grew up in East London, near the best football club in the country, West Ham. If there's any West Ham supporters out there, if not, we need prayer anyway. But I, as you just heard, got into bodybuilding. So I became a bodybuilder at a very young age, and competitive bodybuilding is a strange sport even today, but back then it was even more weird, and very few people were involved in it. And I started training in this gym, a bodybuilding gym in Forest Gate, East London. And I can remember I started enjoying the training at first, just lifting the weights and working out. And I went down to this bodybuilding competition down in Portsmouth, and at first I wasn't sure about it. You know, these guys standing on stage with in their swimming trunks, flexing their muscles. But I thought to myself, you know what, there's an end product of the training. And when they were winning their trophies and winning competitions, I thought, you know, I want to get into that. So I started to compete at a very young age, 17, 18 years of age. And yeah, you know, when you compete as a bodybuilder, as I just said, you put oil all over your body, and you stand on stage with these, we used to call them posing briefs, but they were a very small Speedo. And I would stand there flexing off my muscles. And that is kind of what I did as a sport for many years. But it was the training with the weights and the nutrition that I really enjoyed getting in shape and working out, and the discipline of that. I can remember sitting in the gym one year, and it was my training partner. He was a middleweight. I was a light heavyweight, and his name was John. John said to me, Ian, if we're really going to take this to the next level, we need to get into the anabolic steroids. Now, steroids are a synthetic hormone, and your body produces naturally hormones, male testosterone. And I was a young man, and obviously I was producing testosterone. But I'm ashamed to say, and I'm not proud to say, that I started to cheat in my sport. I started to cheat in my competition, and I started using anabolic steroids. And I used and abused steroids for about 8 years. And there was a 4-year period where literally I was using steroids all the time. I didn't come off of the steroids. And there are many side effects for the abuse of drugs. And as you know, steroids, if you abuse a steroid like any drug, you're going to pay the price for that with your health. And I started to suffer with different health issues, and it ranged from simple high blood pressure and problems with something called gynecomastia, where I started developing lumps in my chest. And I ended up damaging my kidneys. I started to urinate blood, and I ended up in hospital. I had an operation because of the steroids. Yeah, I came out of that hospital and carried on straight away injecting the steroids. In fact, I would have said, I'm prepared to die for the sport. I'm prepared to die to win the next competition. And all I dreamed of all the time was winning competitions and getting in bodybuilding magazines. I can remember actually the local newspaper. I won the Junior South Coast of Britain, and the local newspaper, the Newham Recorder, came to the gym where I was training, and the guys wanted to take some pictures of me in front of this big trophy I just won. And I can remember taking it very seriously, and I oiled myself up, and I was standing in front of this trophy, and I'm doing these muscle poses for this guy. And this fella said to me, he said, you know, I just want to write some stuff about bodybuilding. What kind of food do bodybuilders eat? And I can remember telling him, you know, I eat a lot of eggs. And he said, how many eggs do you eat? And I said, well, I eat about 15 to 20 eggs a day. He said, that's disgusting. How'd you do that? And I can remember I told him I drink them raw. I think I've been watching too many Rocky movies or something, but I said I drink 5 raw eggs at a time. And so that's what I used to do. I used to just crack open 5 raw eggs and drink these eggs down. And I said I probably have 15 to 20 eggs a day. He said, oh, that's fantastic. He made some notes and took the pictures. And I found myself in the center pages of the Newham and Ilford Recorder. And I'm doing this muscle pose, and the headline read, extra strong Ian eats 7,000 eggs a year. And they put eggs all over the paper, and I'm doing this muscle pose where literally I'm pointing to a subheading, and the subheading was this is no yoke. And I can remember getting that newspaper and looking at it. I actually, when I got to the gym that day, my friends had put it all over the changing room. They thought it was hilarious. And I made a vow to myself that I would never tell anyone anything about my life again. But for the last 28 years, I've been sharing my story and my lifestyle and what happened to me and the darkness and I got myself involved in, and the light that took me out of that darkness. I've been sharing that all over the country, particularly in prisons, particularly through the work with Tough Talk, traveling the world, going into countries across Eastern Europe, from Russia, Bulgaria, Poland, all those kind of countries, all across France and Germany and all of Europe, Africa, India, across the States, going into some real hardcore prisons in the Philippines, in China, sharing how my life was, not only did it go down a spiral of darkness, but how something supernatural took me out of that lifestyle. I can remember I became so obsessed with these bodybuilding and bodybuilding steroids. There was a guy in the gym who said to me, Ian, if you're really going to take this to the next level, you really need to up your steroid intake. He said, do you know what? He said, animal steroids are really cheap and effective. You want to get yourself some animal steroids because you can get horse steroids, which are big multi-dose bottles, and you can really load up on that. And I was just very gullible and just, and I'd made this decision once I'd crossed that line from being drug-free to going on the drugs. I was going to do whatever I could to win and achieve my goals. And I was living in this bedsit in East London, above a veterinary surgery. And I thought to myself, that's handy. There's a veterinary surgery underneath this flat, and I'm gonna start looking for this animal steroids. So I started to break in to the veterinary surgery in the middle of the night, and I would help myself to the animal steroids. And I would read on the label of these animal steroids, 1 mil a week for a horse. 1 mil a week for a horse, and I would use 5 to 10 mils a day on myself. I never won the Mr. Universe, but I won the Grand National twice. That's my only joke, guys. I'm not a funny man. I'll just lay that out there. But no, I did take those animal steroids, and I did end up in hospital. And but I carried on abusing these steroids, and I was using the harsh, cool stuff that was really affecting me. But and another side effect of the steroids is it messes around with your hormones, and I started to become very angry, very paranoid. I started to lose my temper a lot, and it was kind of a recipe for disaster, because I started to train and work out in a gym in Bow, East London, and there was a lot of nightclub doormen and bouncers and gangsters hanging around around this gym in Bow in East London. And one of the guys offered me some work on the door of a nightclub, and they used to call them bouncers back in those days. Nowadays they call them door supervisors, but we were known as bouncers. And I can remember this guy. He was an ugly, scary fella. He used to frighten the life out of me. They used to call him Mad Dog. And Mad Dog had a scar down his face, a chewed up ear and no tooth. And but he said to me, "Here, son," he said, "come here." He said, "Do you want to work with me on the door tonight? I've been let down and I need someone to fill in." And I can remember looking at this guy, and actually, I remember thinking, what if I end up looking like you, But he said, "I'll give you double the money, son. Come to work with me and help me out tonight." And I did. I went to work with this fella, Mad Dog. He took me to a pub, a boozer in the Roman Road, East London. And we pulled up outside this place, and it was a Christmas Eve. And I didn't realize he was giving everyone double money because it was Christmas Eve. But anyway, that was what I was on for the night. And he said, "Here," he looked at me. I think he felt sorry for me. He said, "Here, stick this in your jacket. You might need it." And he pulled out from his car seat like a little rounder's bat, like a little truncheon, homemade with a load of black gaffer tape over it. And he said, "Stick that in your coat." I remember putting it in my jacket and thinking, what have I got myself into? And he said, "Here, son, I'm going to introduce you to your colleagues." He said, "These are the guys you're working with." He said, "Ian," he said, "this is Dave the Bus." I'm looking at this massive fella, Dave the Bus, and he said, "This one's One-Eyed Mark." And I can remember I worked for the next months and years with these characters that had come straight out of a movie set, really, and strange fellas. You see, you've got to realize back in those days, door work, bouncing work wasn't regulated by any authority. It was, since 2000, the SIA, the Security Industry Authority, regulates the industry. So you have to have a license to work as a door supervisor, and you get employed and you pay tax and all that. But in these days, back in the 80s and 90s, it wasn't like that. It was all kind of gangs that were running the clubs and the bars, and real kind of crazy fellas that were involved in this world and this lifestyle. And I got myself sucked into this. So it was a recipe for disaster for me, because I'm training and taking these anabolic steroids. And now I'm working in the clubs and the pubs, getting involved with these guys. And they started to invite me to get involved in more and more activities that were wrong. And I started to sink into a real spiral of everything I started to do was wrong, and it was out of order. And I'm not proud of any of this. When I was a young man, I just wanted to be an athlete. I just wanted to win competitions. But as the years were going on, I started to lose the capacity to love and be loved. I became very angry. I became very agitated, depressed, and there was a lot of fear and paranoia.
Life Stories.
My only hope is the element of surprise. I'm not going to wait for any introductions, so I just went straight over to him, decked him, a tremendous punch, and completely floored him, and that was the end of it. And I just walked off back in the car. Didn't have any more problems from the guy after that, but I still didn't get the girl, unfortunately. Well, actually, fortunately for me, because I've got the best girl in the world now, who I'm married to. So I got into the police force, and I loved the job. I just loved the excitement of it. I loved the variety of it. Every day was different. And, Friday, Saturday nights, we used to wait till the pubs came out because you got a good fight. And I was teamed up with a black belt from Manchester. So he was always looking for a fight as well. So we could actually fight legally. But I trusted nobody as a policeman at all. Absolutely trusted nobody. And but God got through to me through death experiences. And I found myself, it was uncanny really, because I found myself time and time again down at the city mortuary. And as part of a policeman's job, sudden deaths, suicides, and so on. But I found I was first on the scene of a murder on South Bridge. It was a top flat on South Bridge in Edinburgh. And I was first on the scene about 4 o'clock in the morning. I entered a flat through suspicious circumstances, and I found a guy tied up with wire, electrical cable, and had been tortured to death with a hammer, as it turned out. So it was pretty messy. And yet that never really bothered me. I went home after the night shift and just went to sleep, and that was fine. And they caught the guys about a week later. And then the BBC, which you'll all know about, in their infinite wisdom, was doing a documentary. It was called the Man Alive documentary. It's now called Horizon. But they were doing a program on death. And my sergeant said, "Stuart, you're volunteered for it. Get down the mortuary again." And I said, "Oh, Sarge, do I have to do, what a waste of time, do I have to do that?" He says, "Get down the mortuary." He says, "You're on it." So here I was, down the mortuary, city mortuary, and they showed us all different scenarios, decomposed bodies, and even a 3-month-old decomposed body didn't particularly bother me. But, on that program, and I had to speak to the cameras, and I just said, looking as hard as nails, you don't let it bother you. You don't get emotionally involved. You keep yourself apart from it. But I remember seeing a young man my age who had committed suicide. And I remember the thoughts going through my mind. Did they not have anything to live for? Did they not have anybody to turn to? Why did they do that? And I could not get this young man out of my head. And it really got through to me. And then I thought, well, where's that person gone? Is there a heaven and a hell? Is there a life after death? If there's a heaven and a hell, I'm going to hell for sure, because, you know, I'm a sinner up to the eyeballs. And I just want to say that a thought I've had is that there are people out there, and you've been contemplating suicide. You've been tormented with thoughts of suicide. You've maybe not even attempted suicide. But let me tell you that Jesus wants to get hold of your life and give you a life worth living. He says, I have come that you might have life, that you may have life and have it to the full. He wants to give you life abundantly. He wants to give you a life worth living. You know, I thought I was living, but I was dead. He has given me a life worth living, and you can have that too. And I'm going to pray with you at the end, and you can receive that. And so, as I said, I found myself confronted with death time and time again. And every time I would think, where's that person gone? Is there a life after death? What about me? I know, you know, and it would come right back to myself, and God would confront me with my eternal destiny. But it also showed me in the police the absolute uncertainty of life. You know, I saw the worst side of life on the streets. And as I say, I had everything. I was successful. I had everything you could wish for. But it showed me that you can lose everything just like that. And there are people listening to my voice tonight, and you are in financial mess and meltdown. But Jesus wants to be your security. He wants to be your security in your life. Your money, our possessions are not our security. You can't take it with you. Jesus is my security, and it can be yours as well. So then in my heart was a longing for something else, a longing for love, true love, a longing for someone I could really trust in. And this was the Holy Spirit working in me over months. And my mother, I had a praying mother who had tried to share the gospel with me. And I remember, and it's through my mother's prayers that not only I came to Christ, but every one of my family, one after the other. And so my mother would try to share the gospel with me, and I would get really angry. And I would say to her, you know, I'll tell you where you can stick it. I don't want your history lesson from 2,000 years ago. What does a man dying on a cross 2,000 years ago have to do with me in the 20th century? And I just couldn't understand it. And I didn't realize at the time, but Jesus took my rap on the cross. He paid the price, the fine for all my sin. He took all the rottenness, the addiction, the abuse of my life, all the anger, all the wretchedness of my life, and yours upon the cross, upon himself on the cross. And then he rose again from the dead. And if we receive it, we no longer have to carry it anymore. He took it so that we no longer have to carry it. He took all our sin and our sorrow and our sickness and our pain so that we don't have to carry it anymore.
Life Stories.